In March of 2010, I went to Capel Middle School East. I was getting ready to present my English project to the entire class. I walked up to the board, and as soon as I hit the clicker, the phone rang. I wondered who this lucky person might be. Then my teacher said, "Ramya, pack up your stuff. You need to go to the front office. Your mom is waiting and here to pick you up." I felt a sigh of relief swift past me. But then the questions raised. Why me and why now? As soon as I went to the front office, we rushed to the car. The next thing I knew, we were at the airport, and then on the airplane, and then in a hospital in India. I'd never been so confused in my life. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ramya Reddy, and I am a senior at Frisco High School. This is my first year to be a part of ISM, and the topic I chose to study is cardiothoracic surgery. The scenario I had just mentioned earlier was what I went through to find out that my grandfather had just got a heart attack and was in the ICU. A few weeks later, my grandfather got discharged and was fine again. This incident greatly moved me, and it is what convinced me that being a surgeon was worth it if it could save a life. As a kid, I never really liked going to the doctor's office. Honestly, the only reason I even went was to get a sticker and a lollipop. I then decided that if I ever had to do anything for my career, it had to be something that makes my heart flutter. It had to be something that I'm passionate about and something I could do on a daily basis. Later, I found out about surgery. It caught my attention, and the more I understood the concept of it, the more I wanted to become a surgeon. After around 34 phone calls and 20 emails sent to professionals, I started off my interviews with Dr. Gautam Reddy, who works at Heart Place at Plano as an interventional cardiologist. I started off talking to Dr. Gautam about college and the difference between college in America and college in India, which is where Dr. Reddy studied medicine. We went off into a deep conversation, and I gained a lot of information about how it doesn't matter where you study, but rather the knowledge that you have gained from the education. Something I found interesting was the fact that patients would fake being sick in order to get drugs, according to Dr. Gautam Reddy. My second informational interview was with Dr. Lynn Huffman, who works at UT Southwestern as a cardiothoracic surgeon. With Dr. Lynn Huffman, we discussed about how research is often conducted in labs. Dr. Lynn Huffman told me about how experiments would be conducted and the tests that they had commonly done in the labs and the specific medicines and drugs that they used to test on animals as an experimental group. And the animals that they used primarily consisted of rats or guinea pigs. One thing I was quite fascinated by were the medical resumes. The resumes that the doctors had were no less than 10 pages, completely long compared to a normal resume you'd see, which are around 2 to 3 pages long. Dr. Lynn Huffman also told me about how his busy schedule as a doctor started off at 5 a.m., and then he would go for his rounds and have a batch of paperwork to do, and then his first surgical case. A surgical case would last around 3 to 4 hours depending on the severity of the case, and after that he would go on rounds again and meet all his patients. And if there was one, he'd have another surgical case. Through this interview, I learned that it is a lot of hard work to become a surgeon, but it's all worth it at the end. My third informational interview was with Dr. Scott Resnick, who also works at UT Southwestern as a cardiothoracic surgeon. Dr. Scott Resnick's conversation with me started off talking about parents. I remember how he told me about patients. I remember how he told me about how he had encountered 2 patients in one day who were around 100 years apart. And the craziest part was that the 106-year-old was surprisingly quite healthy while the 6-year-old was very sick. Another patient he encountered was a patient who had arthritis and suffered from esophageal perforation. Esophageal perforation is when there's a hole in the esophagus And this is bad as the unsterilized matter in the body could spread to the other organs. To fix this problem, the surgeons connected the esophagus to the side of the neck. This fixed the problem temporarily, and later the woman got surgery done to give a permanent fix to the perforation. In a few months, she was back to normal, healthier than expected, as she was recovering well and fast. Overall, while I was talking with Dr. Scott Resnick, I really liked an analogy that he made about the fact that hospitals are similar to the setting of high schools. The jocks are like the orthopedic surgeons, and the nerds are like the cardiothoracic, and so on. The groups don't get along the best way possible, but they learn to live and work with each other. Life in a way is like that too. You'll not always get along with everyone, but eventually you must learn to work alongside with them. My fourth informational interview was with Dr. Carlos Bagley, who is a neurosurgeon at UT Southwestern. Through this interview, I learned the importance of managing time and life well. Dr. Carlos Bagley specifically focuses on surgeries done on tumors with injuries related to the spinal cord. Through Dr. Carlos Bagley's interview, I realized how different neurosurgery was from cardiothoracic. Also, what I learned was how cardiothoracic surgery has split so much in the past few years. As we know now, under cardiac specialty, there's cardiothoracic, cardiovascular, and there's also interventional cardiology, unlike in neuro. Another thing I learned was the fact that neurosurgery has a very high risk of things going wrong during and after surgery. And it's very unpredictable. My fifth informational interview was with Dr. Kelly Hutchison, who works at the Heart Place at Baylor Plano, and she's a cardiothoracic surgeon. With the interview with Dr. Hutchison, I learned the difference between a private practice and an academic practice. Private practices involve teaching, but rather than researching, while academic practices involve teaching residents while researching and performing surgeries. I realized through this interview that communicating is very important, not just in the hospital setting, but also with your patients. My sixth interview was with Dr. Hunt Badger, who is a neurosurgeon at UT Southwestern. I met Dr. Hunt Badger as soon as he came out of surgery. The patient he was working on had a tumor in his head on the right side, which affected his ability to comprehend and speak. After the tumor was successfully removed, the patient was sent off to the ICU. However, according to Dr. Badger, when the patient wakes up, he might not be able to talk, he told me. He could learn how to speak again. However, the unpredictability of surgery is shown in this example, how you never know what will happen because we don't have the knowledge regarding the brain as well as we do of other organs in our body as of right now. I realized the importance of relationships with patients, as Dr. Badger and the patient must get along with the family as well. And it's important to gain a level of trust because getting a surgery done is a major issue or major part of a person's life. And anything could happen. The outcomes could be extremely successful or extremely unsuccessful or in the middle, but it's important to have a relationship with the patient so that they trust you before they put their lives in a doctor's hand. My next informational interview was with Dr. Pietro Bayona, who also works at UT Southwestern as a cardiothoracic surgeon. With Dr. Bayona, I learned the difference between interventional cardiology and surgery. I learned about how interventional cardiology involves minimally invasive procedures, while cardiothoracic involves open heart surgery for the most part. I found that Dr. Bayona's type of surgeries were those of patients who had athlete's heart. Athlete's heart is when there's a huge growth of muscle or heart muscle on the heart itself, And so there's not a perfect rhythm of the heart. It's always either too slow or too fast, and it doesn't help in the breathing process. And so the reason Dr. Bayona told me he liked these surgeries was because of the success rate. Normally during cardiothoracic surgeries, such as like cabbages or mitral valve replacements, they somewhat help the patient live for a couple of years. However, it always has to be replaced or some type of situation. But with athlete's heart, once they cut off the excess muscle on the heart, the patient can go back to his normal life, and that's what everyone's dream is. So that, and my 8th interview was with Dr. Matthias Peltz, who works at UT Southwestern also as a cardiothoracic surgeon. And he is actually the head of the heart transplant team, and he works with the ICU a lot. And with him, we talked about the ICU and about the intense amount of paperwork that doctors have to go through on a daily basis. I remember as soon as I went into his office, there were papers everywhere. Like, there was not even a space on the desk where there weren't papers. But moving on, next is about my research assessments. So with my research assessments, I particularly focused on areas which involved talking about post-operative complications, so not necessarily what happens in surgery, but after surgery. So I focused on post-operative pulmonary complications, whole blood viscosity and delirium after cardiac surgery, and outcome of atherectomy, and how to reduce readmissions. For my original work, I created a student journal, and this specific journal has notes relating to the cardiac system of the heart as well as the respiratory system, and so like the lungs, the esophagus, and the heart itself. And from this point of view, so I wrote it in a point of view of an intern who plans on pursuing cardiothoracic surgery. So these procedures such as coronary artery bypass graftings, artificial heart valve surgery, heart transplants, angioplasty, and many more surgical procedures. I took these procedures and wrote out a vague or brief description of what is the surgery, why are these surgeries done, what type of patients are they commonly done on, and I focused on, so these are examples of what I took out of, or like the research I had done. And I researched specific procedures, and these not only include what they are, but also the steps that are done in the surgery itself. So like for patients, for an intern to understand what happens in the surgery, maybe not the specifics like the types of drugs used and such, but what exactly is done in the operating room. And so with my mentor, I asked Dr. Kelly Hutchison to be my mentor at the Heart Place of Baylor at Plano, and she accepted. So, So she accepted, and so after Dr. Kelly Hutchison agreed to be my mentor, I went to the clinic, and this was for my first mentor visit. It was actually my first time shadowing under a doctor, so I learned a lot that day. I started off at the clinic, and I met Dr. Hutchison's scribe at first, who explained me how the clinic works, because for surgeons, it's a bit different to normal doctors. So I started, the scribe explained to me how the clinic works and what Dr. Hutchison's day looked like on a regular basis at the clinic. So I met 2 patients of Dr. Kelly Hutchison's. Both patients had just undergone surgery a couple of weeks ago and came back for a checkup. The first man had mitral valve repair and was recovering perfectly. The second patient, however, did not recover so well. Since his surgery, he had passed out 4 times and had lost around 20 pounds. After around half an hour of discussing, Dr. Kelly Hutchison found out the reason to passing out. And the reason ended up being he hadn't eaten any food since his surgery. Like, I mean, in a day, he'd maybe eat cereal, a cup of cereal, and a few grapes in one day. And I thought this was pretty bad because, and it is, because after surgery, people tend to burn calories even without doing actual physical activity. So even if they're just sitting down, they're burning calories just in minutes. So patients need the food in order to gain some of those calories that they're losing just by sitting down. Afterwards, I saw a tracheotomy, which I found to be very fun and interesting, actually. That concluded my first mentor visit, and afterwards I went on multiple mentor visits in which I was able to get into the operating rooms. I saw a couple of coronary artery bypass graftings and also mitral valve repairs with tricuspid valve repairs. And I loved going on mentor visits as each patient I met had something new and interesting going on. I remember this one patient I met needed a CABG as his artery was blocked. And I remember when Dr. Kelly Hutchison sliced right through him, the heart wasn't there, or you couldn't see it at first, because it was all the way below, like 6 inches below where it was supposed to be. So she ended up having to cut 6 inches below the sternum, and the surgery went well, but it was pretty crazy how the heart could have been so out of place. Another time, she operated on a patient who was an addicted meth user. Her surgery had a couple of complications due to a lot of calcium buildup in the heart itself, but the surgery was a success at the end. Similar to these, with each mentor visit, I learned something new. I met new doctors and new patients, and overall I enjoyed my mentor experience, and I hope to learn much more through the mentorship. For my final product, I decided to do research over a specific surgery and write a detailed medical version of what happens in the operating room, and also a brief description of the surgery for patients and family to look and understand. So I also started to learn suturing techniques, which with this I decided to create tutorial videos of the types of sutures and how to suture, so medical students or anyone who wants to learn to suture, I guess, could use it as a tutorial and learn how to suture themselves. I started off my final product by looking at various options of surgeries done under cardiothoracic surgery. At first, I was going to do ventricular septal defect, but then I realized that those types of surgeries are commonly done on little children around like the age of 5 and 6, and also I would most likely not be able to see that type of surgery in the OR while mentoring with Dr. Hutchison. So after speaking with my mentor, we came to the conclusion that a CABG would be the best surgery to use as research, as they're commonly done in her OR at least, and it would give me a chance to observe the surgery more often and get a better idea of what's happening. I ended up observing a couple of CABGs, which really helped me get a better understanding of the instruments used and the drugs given to the patient after talking with the anesthesiologist. And I also got a good understanding of how the bypass machine is used with the technician. So next, I started researching the specific components I learned from watching the surgery. So in the OR, I took notes of everything happening in the notes section of my phone, and when I got home, I would research, or I would go more in depth using databases to find the information on the specific drugs the anesthesiologist told me that he used, and so why each drug was used and what effect does it have on the patient, and when it is right and when it's wrong to use the drug, and basically concepts that are used in surgery. I particularly wrote out my research as I found it helpful to me in remembering the information. So as you can see here, those are just some of the suturing techniques and instruments used and how to remove suture, and so these I particularly wrote out so that I could gather up more information to make my tutorial videos for the suturing, because there are more than 5 types of suturing. There's a lot of types of suturings that could be learned, so I took the most commonly done, so like the horizontal mattress, vertical mattress, and so on. So overall, I hope to continue my mentorship with Dr. Kelly Hutchison over the summer, and I will be pursuing medicine as a neuroscience major at UT Dallas at Richardson. And over the next few years, I hope to add on to my final product and gain a better knowledge in the different fields in medicine, and hopefully become a successful surgeon as I dream of being now. So this finally brings me to say, think before you say no. You just might miss one of the most beautiful days of your life. I learned the importance of the word yes. In life, saying no could result in an opportunity missed. Therefore, I intend to take every opportunity that I come across. No matter what you do, whether you think it will be beneficial later in life or not, it's important to try and go for that yes. Because a life with no regrets is the way I want to live. I don't want to miss what I could have got if I hadn't said no. If there's something I learned in life, it is the value of life, and for that very reason, I want to become a surgeon. My lifestyle so far is what inspired me to choose medicine to be the best route for me. I'm a person who believes that you should think before saying no Regarding this, I believe that even though medicine is a long route and one which will take a lot of time and be very competitive, I'll never say no or quit, as I may just miss what makes me happy for the rest of my life. So thank you, Dr. Hutchison, for taking your time to be my mentor and helping me in this journey. And thank you everyone else for coming and listening to my experiences this year.